This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit. What do you guys want to talk about?
What's going on, people? It is currently... Well, it's Sunday afternoon as I'm sitting down to record this. All in preparation to actually edit and upload everything for tomorrow's show. I think I've done the deep dive on all the bells and whistles I'd go into putting this show together. I'm a one-man working crew. So I actually have to carve out various points in my day to actually sit down and piece everything together. It's not easy, but I enjoy it. Gives me a chance to go back and actually listen to the full recaps. That way I actually remember what I was talking about. So we're doing the Monday show, apparently, which means it's WWF discussion time. Goody. We got Retro Raw and Retro NXT to talk about today. Working our way through the libraries and seeing how well a lot of that old classic content holds up. In the case of Raw, it's just as bad as we remember it being when we were kids. That is, if you grew up watching during that time and you're one of those millennial folk. Elsewise, we also got SmackDown from Friday to talk about, which will probably take us like 2 minutes to talk about because nothing happened on that show worth discussing in grave detail. Of course, though, if you're a first-time FSWR viewer, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can either support us on YouTube or Rumble, depending on which platform you prefer. These days, it's kind of a grab bag. But we're here each passing Monday and Friday to bring you new content and the classic and modern wrestling talk. Got some big shows coming up in the next couple weeks, too. Between now and basically the end of the month, I've got to figure out how I want to squeeze in a Survivor Series 1994, a Survivor Series 2023, and a Starrcade 1987 recap. Because they're all basically wedged together along the same timeline, date-wise. So if we're going to keep things consistent with dates and calendars, we're basically going to need to be cramming in 6 hours worth of content into one weekend. Well, if you factor in WWE Survivor Series on Peacock, that'll tack on an additional 8 hours. So, I can tell you right now, we're going to be either skipping a lot of stuff, or I'm going to be drinking a lot of caffeine between now and then. Depends on how badly I want to torture myself. Don't worry, we got Retro Raw to talk about right now. An hour of that each week is enough torture to last a lifetime. Two weeks. We are 2 weeks out from Salvation. Even though that's not true in the slightest. Because that would imply that things are actually going to get better after Survivor Series 94. Which, as we all know, is far from accurate. I'm at the point now where I just want the stench of some of these programs to be put out the pasture. Mainly referring to anything involving Doink, Lawler, and the Little People. So I'm just kind of counting down the days until Survivor Series at this point. So this was another one of those Raws where they basically carved out the first 10 minutes of the show from the network. So we missed almost the entirety of the Bob Backlund 1-2-3 Kid match, which they advertised last week. Again, I don't know what the rationale was for it. Something tells me they may have aired something at the time that wasn't deemed suitable for TV audiences. So the WWE cut it out from the network and basically skipped the entirety of the first segment. Either that or the match was so gruesomely horrible, the editor said, yeah, ain't nobody want to see that. I mean, how bad could it have been? I kind of wanted to see it. But, well, that basically voided any reason to watch the show this week for the in-ring product, because everything else was just a bunch of meaningless squashes. So when the show officially begins this week, we see Backlund putting Waltman in the chicken wing clutch. I assume Backlund already won the match since he already had the hold applied and they were ringing the bell incessantly because he wouldn't break the hold. So finally out comes Brett to scare off Backlund, at which point Backlund gets on the microphone and tells Brett that he's a convivial individual. Also that he could have been truculent by refusing to break the chicken wing hold that he had on the 1-2-3 Kid, but he just wanted Brett to know that the same fate awaits him at Survivor Series. Now, for the record, I was familiar with the term convivial. Can't say it's a word I use all that often anymore, but truculent. Now that one, I learned something new at the ripe age of 35. I did not know what the proper definition of the word truculent was until I looked it up on the interwebs. Apparently it's a synonym for hostile and or aggressive. Now see, this is why it was great to have Mr. Backlund around in 1994. He could both educate us on the English language and kick our asses at the same time. 2 for the price of 1. And we don't even have to pay tuition to get the education. So, long story short, Brett chased Backlund up the aisleway. He put him in the sharpshooter for about 3 seconds, and then he let go of the hold so that he could walk back down to the ring, pick up the microphone, and tell Backlund that when he puts the sharpshooter on him at the pay-per-view, he won't let go. Sounds like a vague threat, if you ask me. The question remains, well, okay, if you prove that you could put the sharpshooter on Mr. Backlund now, why did you let go? If you were just going to claim that you were not going to let go of the hold at the pay-per-view, what difference does it make? I mean, all in all, the post-match was good. Can't really judge the segment one way or the other because we missed the entire fucking match. You know, it's unfortunate. The Backlund-Brett feud is just, it's taken such a back seat to all the other storylines on TV. Now it kind of seems like they're overcompensating by trying to heat up the animosity with like 2 weeks of build. But that was our cold open intro for the show, if you can even call it that. And then we had our first segment proper for this week's Retro Raw. As my notes read, fucking Mabel and Oscar rapping about Team Guts and Glory. The only thing of which I wrote down was something about Adam Bomb being the Asian of devastation and Lex Luger's coming. That is all. That is where I end the conversation entirely. Adam Bomb is Asian, and Luger is coming. This show fucking sucks. And then Mabel wrestled the Blue Phantom, which also fucking sucked. By the way, Ted DiBiase was on color this week. And he began his commentary for this match by calling Mabel 400 pounds of guts. And if that was not direct fact shaming, Vince properly corrected him by saying, actually, Mabel is well into the 500-pound mark. Thus merely proving DiBiase's point that he's fat. There was also something in here where DiBiase called Paul Bear a Pillsbury Doughboy. That is 2 fat people references in the span of the first 10 minutes of the show, much less the same segment. Mabel won with the Boss Man Slam in like 90 seconds, and that was followed with about 5 minutes of Todd Pettingill running down the Survivor Series card, with Chuck Norris making a cameo to remind everybody that he is going to be the special guest referee for Undertaker versus Yokozuna in the casket match. As if that pay-per-view wasn't already obscure to begin with. Why not? Why not throw Chuck Norris in there to be a completely random special guest referee for a casket match? Never understood it as a kid. Still don't understand it to this day. Other than the fact that Vince loves his celebrities. Well, and there was also that iconic angle they captured at the end of the match, which I'm not going to spoil directly, but it does involve the next man I'm about to talk about. Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Yeah, he was in action this week, wrestling the Italian Stallion, who obviously did not go by the Italian Stallion in WWF. Gary Sabat, I believe the proper name was. I mean, compared to everything else on the show, it was the best match by default. You know, compared to most quality TV matches in wrestling, it was mid at best. Jarrett worked over Gary's knees for the heat, ended up getting the verbal submission with the figure 4 lock, and then Vince made a joke about not being able to find Jarrett's latest album at his local record store. You know, the classic one. He broke 10,000 guitars and never drew a fucking dime. Oh, wait a minute. That was Mike Graham. My bad. And then we go from that to what I coin the dirt worst of dirt worst WWF comedy. Funny enough, in a segment involving dirt. And a lot of it. We had another IRS pre-tape from a grave site where he's talking about dead bodies having to pay their taxes. And in this particular video, IRS is legitimately talking to a casket that he had supposedly dug up from underground. And, well, the punchline, after Rotunda does the promo directing his message toward The Undertaker, they cut back to the arena where Vince responds with, "Oh my. Undertaker's not going to be happy with that one." To which I asked, "What? Having to pay taxes? Since when does the fucking Undertaker care about having to pay taxes? Is that what he and Paul Bear have to discuss every March or April during the height of tax season? Casket expenses? They have to sit down and talk about all the souls they've collected and then jot down the expenses for all the coffins they had to bury the dead bodies in. Does the government get a cut of that? What is this storyline? The fuck does any of this have to do with anything? Why is IRS mad at The Undertaker? Why is he cutting promos on caskets? Why is any of this shit happening? Well, the answer is this show fucking sucks. I'm still trying to look for actual logic behind any of this crap. There's none to be found. Spoiler alert. Then we come back for another King's Court. And, as soon as he's out there doing the whole heel shtick, I'm just groaning because I'm expecting the midget clowns to show up at any moment. Or the midget kings, which are equally as bad. Luckily, that did not happen. We had a moment of clarity this week. Here comes Owen Hart. It is the King's Court with Jerry Lawler, but he's not the only king in town, because we also have the WWF King of the Ring, in case anybody forgot. And they're out there talking about Backlund and Brett, the submission rules match at the upcoming Survivor Series, where the only way to win is to throw in the towel. Literally speaking, they're going to have cornermen on each side. And at this stage, we have now established that Davey Boy will be in Brett's corner, and Owen will be in Mr. Backlund's corner. And Owen is a man of his word. He promises that he will never throw in the proverbial towel. Arnold Skolin may have fucked over Backlund in 1983 when he threw in the towel, cost him the WWF World title. The prick. But Owen won't let that happen again. Backlund got screwed once, and now it's Brett that's going to get screwed. Boy, was that an omen for things to come. How many times are we going to hear the words uttered in the same sentence, Brett and screwed? Way too much, unfortunately. So they call out Bulldog to give him a piece of their mind. And out comes Davey Boy to break the news to Owen and Lawler. He says that Brett will not have the towel thrown in for him. He will not go down to the chicken wing hold. And Brett will walk out of Survivor Series with the WWF Championship. At which point Owen tells Davey Boy that he's always been wrong. And Backlund will, in fact, get the chicken wing clutch locked in. But he wants Bulldog to do him a favor. As Backlund locks in that chicken wing on Brett, he wants Bulldog to let him suffer for a little bit before he throws in the towel. He wants Bulldog to let him squeal and shriek like a baby. And then he can throw in the towel after Brett's had enough. This guy's a fucking remarkable peevish dick. I love heel Owen. With every fiber of my being. He's so great. Like, hands down, the only redeeming quality about this abortion of a TV program from week to week. Heel Owen Hart. He's the best. Out of the entire 40-minute program we saw this week, including the edits, the 15-second snippet of Owen being a douchebag to his brother, saying he wants Bulldog to avoid throwing in the towel for Brett until he suffered enough pain. It's the best. Like, think about how ludicrous this all is. Owen is so consumed with jealousy and resentment for his older brother, Brett. He doesn't even care about Backlund winning the WWF title. He just wants to see Brett suffer. Awesome. I also love seeing Lawler be the slimy toady for Owen here, and cheering him on as he's bad-mouthing Brett. Because it makes sense in kayfabe. Lawler hates Brett's guts, so he's going to approve of seeing the excellence of execution suffer in a chicken wing hold. After all, who doesn't love seeing two heels shit-talk a babyface? Especially when they share a common interest. And then it was immediately back into the cesspool as we go to our TV main event. The official debut of an all-time rotten wrestling gimmick. Now, they telegraphed this last week in the promotional advertisement they did. I can't believe I'm going to say this. The Portuguese man of war, Aldo Montoya. Yes. The time they took PJ Polacco / Just Incredible and had him wrestle with a fucking thong on his face. It was supposed to be a mask, for the record. And the gimmick became so legendarily wretched, even the boys in the back started ribbing him about it. Mainly the mask, although the entire outfit was ludicrous. And it sucks too, because if you know anything about Just Incredible's work, he was a great athlete. He could work, he could move, but fuck. The gimmick totally killed his credibility from day one. And the whole thing's so absurd here. Okay, so he beats the Brooklyn Brawler in like 2 minutes. The match is, at best, okay. It was a serviceable, middle-of-the-road match for a TV show. But of course, DiBiase has to sell it on commentary that he was impressed with the performance because they have to advance a post-match angle. So in comes DiBiase to try to recruit Montoya to the $1 Million Corporation. As if the group wasn't already surrounded by a bunch of goofy comedy characters as it was. Now he wants to add Aldo Montoya. So, Placo has to do a terrible Portuguese accent, and he denounces DiBiase's crew, saying he wants nothing to do with him or the $1 Million Corporation. And his go-home line is telling him that he can take the money and shove it in his ear hole. Mic drop. So, now there's your next program for the corporation. Again, the gimmick was Death TV from the moment he came out there in that ridiculous costume. The mask that looked like a fucking jockstrap. Like, you think I'm kidding? I'm not. If you have no memories of this Aldo Montoya gimmick, go back and watch it for yourself, dude. I'm just reporting on what I see. Like, I mean, there are certain gimmicks that you can make work if you're talented enough. I don't even think Steve Austin or The Rock could have made this gimmick work. It's on that same level as a Bash and Booger type thing where, I mean, let's just call it like it is. It was explicitly done to bury the guy and run him out of the business entirely. Yet somehow Aldo Montoya actually stuck around longer than I expected. God almighty. When fans compiled the list of top 10 or top 15 worst gimmicks of all time in wrestling, there's a reason Aldo Montoya usually makes the single digits. Because it's pretty fucking putrid. Worse than Sparky Plug. Worse than the Smoking Guns. Worse than, well, of course, now I'm drawing a blank. I can't think of anybody. Beaver Cleavage. That was a pretty terrible gimmick, too. Naked Midian. God, there are plenty more rotten gimmicks coming up in the next 3 or 4 years. Oh, just you wait. We might actually have to tally them. We might need to dedicate a portion of the FSWR show just to do tier columns. Do like all-time terrible gimmicks ranked by wretchedness. With S being passably bad and F being the lowest of the low. Where do we rank Montoya on the list? Hypothetically. D category? F plus maybe? It's definitely in those two tiers for sure. So anyway, with approximately 1 minute of TV time left, we had a Lunder Blaze out at ringside with Vince and Ted to plug her upcoming Women's Championship match with Bull Nakano. Not at Survivor Series, but the Tokyo Dome in Japan. Yes. That was their final send-off for the week. Bull Nakano challenging Alundra Blaze for the Women's Championship in Japan at the Tokyo Dome. All right, then. Cool. Judging how you don't hear many people raving about that match, you have to go out on a limb and imagine it wasn't very good. But she was confident she would return to the States as the champion. As confident as Alundra could dictate on the microphone, which wasn't much. And that was that. Yep. It was indeed a show. Even a WWF Raw reduction episode is still bad, as compared to the usual full-length bad shows. And keep in mind, folks, airtime is 1 hour. 1 hour. Wait until we go to 2. Holy fuck. I don't think I'm going to make it. So, yeah. Again, 2 weeks out from Survivor Series. I don't know what the deal was with Waltman and Backlund's match getting cut. I mean, I imagine it was a decent TV match, but since I don't have any reference in front of me at the moment, I can't really argue one way or the other. Remove that from the equation. The show was merely saved by Owen Hart's douchebaggery. Which is astonishing when to say it out loud, but that's the God-honest truth. Heel Owen Hart. He's the only good thing about this show. Elsewise, you got nothing to look forward to except for Doink the Clown, Midget Lawler Kings, and Auto fucking Montoya. That's what we're left with. Plus whatever other cartoon characters they dish out occasionally to fill up TV time. I mean, compared to most Raws, I would say this was merely boring as opposed to outright dreck. But just the mere sight of Auto Montoya, it's enough to give you gas just thinking about it. I'm not kidding. I'm strongly considering doing a tier list for all-time horrendous WWF gimmicks. I guess that means I'd have to go back in time and try to remember some of the ones that fell through. The Bash and Boogers, the Ludwig Borgas of the world. The ones that got phased out unceremoniously. I'll see. Depends on how much time I have. I don't even know how you do those things on YouTube. But everyone's doing them now. So, if they can figure it out, so can I. But right now, I'm just mainly focused on getting through Survivor Series 94 and the build-up to Rumble season in January. In the meantime, we'll flip the switch here and go over to SmackDown from Friday night. The post-Saudi show. Chance for WWE to hit the reset button and, I'll bluntly put, kind of pretend that show never happened. Glad to know I wasn't part of the fringe minority this time when I said that pay-per-view was a total snooze fest. But going into the show, not really knowing what they were going to do with all the bloodline stuff, I was oddly curious to see how they were going to follow up with LA Knight. Are they still going to give him that star treatment, or is he just going to slowly fade into the background and become a jag? Well, we'll talk about LA Knight later on. One of the few saving graces about this show looking back. I mean, if I were booking the show, I'd have had LA Knight storm out as soon as the cameras were on. That way he can pitch a fit about getting fucked in his match with Roman at Crown Jewel. Wouldn't that make the most sense? Well, if you were a booker with a clue, sure. But that's not the world we live in these days with the creative teams in wrestling. No. Instead, they started with Kevin Owens, who, if I recall, did not make a single appearance on Crown Jewel last weekend at all. But he wasn't out there to wrestle this week. He was out there to be an awkward third-wheel commentator, filling in for Corey Graves, who apparently was at home with his newborn. So congrats to him. And of course, the one night they decide to put Owens on commentary, his voice is damn near shot. Sounded like he was gargling with rusty fishing hooks all night. But at least he had a necktie on, while still sporting the sleeveless tank top and not shaving. It's like, could you make the guy look any more like a geek? So after we established all that and wasted about 3 minutes, here comes the LWO, and Ray's going out there to talk about the video footage from Crown Jewel, the whole brass knucks incident with Logan Paul, that he stole Ray's championship, blah, blah. You know, it's basically a cut and dry babyface promo. He wants to recapture the U.S. title. And eventually out comes Carlito with his C-level WWE redub music. And he's basically acknowledging the quiet part out loud. You got Santos Escobar innocuously standing there playing dumb, like he had nothing to do with the brass knucks being placed on the ring apron at Crown Jewel, when everybody clearly saw he planted them on purpose. So Carlito's doing the right thing. Hey, if you don't want to talk about it, Ray, that's fine, but I'll bring it up. So he holds Escobar's feet to the fire, tells him he's responsible for everything that went down, which doesn't go over well with Escobar. He ends up storming off through the crowd with Ray and Zelina following him. Meanwhile, the Legato flunkies are talking with Carlito ahead of his match with Bobby Lashley. And you know, while the segment wasn't anything special, we'll talk about how it tied in with the following match. I actually kind of like the idea of Escobar working the blameless, ignorant heel role. You know, where he knows he's guilty, but he's just out there buying his time while Ray's totally oblivious to everything that's going on. Turns out they went in a totally different direction in the next 10 minutes. But I even like the utilization of Carlito here. He's sort of the cognizant elder ring veteran that knows about the kind of heel tricks Escobar pulled. Like, he saw right through that charade. Sucks, because if they didn't just immediately rush into pulling the trigger on the whole thing in the following fucking segment, you know, they could have actually developed this over a series of weeks or months until we actually see the Escobar heel turn. But instead, they decided to run through about 2 months worth of story content in like 15 minutes. Apparently, they hired Russo as a consultant, and we weren't made aware of it. So we come back from break. As my notes read here, it's 2007 all over again. The match is Bobby Lashley versus Carlito in a straight match. Of course, the irony is Lashley looks no different now than he did in 2007. Still yoked and jacked to the gills. Maybe a couple more wrinkles in the facial area. And yes, neither of these guys are what you would consider spring chickens at this point. In the case of Carlito, I don't really think I would argue he was ever a spring chicken to begin with. Maybe when he was motivated, he would put in more effort than usual. Here it was just more of a going through the motions kind of match until we got to the angle at the very end. I did note the impressive feat of strength Carlito had to hoist up Bobby Lashley into a delayed vertical suplex. Funny how I have to remind myself, you know, in comparison to most talent in today's business, Carlito would probably be considered a super heavyweight. Like, go back. 2006, 2007, Carlito was one of the smaller guys on the roster at the time. Like, him giving Lashley a standing vertical suplex back then, that was almost unheard of. Now that I realize Carlito's like twice the size of everybody in the LWO, plus the Street Profits. Now I look at it and I'm like, it's not that surprising. So they're doing the match, and it ends up breaking down with all the interference crap at the end. I couldn't even recall all the details of what happened, but I know Montez Ford grabbed Carlito's ankle behind the ref's back, and then Lashley speared him and won. That was all mainly just to set up the post-match, where the heels are ghetto-stomping Carlito into oblivion, and Escobar's standing there watching the entire thing go down, not lifting a finger to help. So out comes Ray with a folding chair to actually send the heels packing this time. And then they do the long, dramatic sequence with Ray and Escobar where, I mean, in a way, I kind of understand what they were going for here. On the other hand, man, if this was going to be how they blew off the Escobar heel turn, I don't know, dude. I probably would have gone with my idea first. Am I the only one that just thought this came off so lame in execution? Well, first, Ray shoves Escobar for not helping Carlito. Then Escobar has to stand there dumbfounded while Ray attends to Carlito. And then Escobar kind of paintbrushes Ray from behind. And then they get into another shoving match. And by the time the whole thing was over, we had this weird back and forth exchange where, it kind of looked like the company was toying with the fans' reactions, and it was impossible to figure out what the hell was going on here. Whether or not Escobar turned for real. Like, he kept saying, "We're family, Ray." And "It was supposed to be me and you, Ray." Which makes absolutely no sense from a kayfabe standpoint because, Escobar never had a problem with the Legado lackeys or Zelina Vega's involvement prior to this. What's he so bent out of shape about? Now all of a sudden Escobar's jealous that Ray's buddy-buddy with all the other LWO members? Or is it just Carlito? Again, the whole thing just came off really rushed. Like, he ends up shoving Ray into the ring post after Ray bitch slaps him. And then when Ray accidentally falls in between the ring steps, you get Escobar charging at him with a drop kick, so they do the angle there. It's like, how did we get here? Escobar went from the lucky-go-happy LWO member to raging lunatic jealous friend within the span of 15 minutes? There's something called character evolution in wrestling. And then there's stuff like this where you watch it and you can tell they just made a knee-jerk decision at the last minute where I don't think a lot of it was thought through very well. It's like they sat down before the show and said, all right, people already know the heel turn's coming eventually, so rather than prolonging it anymore, let's just do it now. Move on. So I wasn't really a big fan of all this. Not that I was ever all that captivated with the LWO stuff to begin with. But now they just kind of took the one suspenseful thing about the whole group teasing dissension and then flushed it down the toilet within the first half hour. Now instead of saving Ray versus Escobar for a WrestleMania match, doing it in front of a big crowd and trying to do some money-making grudge blow-off. Well, now it looks like they're going to do the blow-off before the end of the year. I don't get it. But that was far from the worst thing on the show. Because after all that went down, I left the room for a couple minutes, and I came back when Bayley was in the ring getting wutted by the fans, which is very apropos for what I was thinking at the time. I had no idea what she was talking about, but Apparently, she was pissed off that Io Sky didn't talk to her about bringing in Kairi Sane at Crown Jewel or something. So she calls Io down to talk about it. Those were her words. Because that's what we do in pro wrestling soap operas in 2023. We talk about the issues instead of, fighting. So here come Io, Dakota, and Kairi. So apparently Dakota is still a member of Damage Control, even though she wasn't at Crown Jewel last weekend and tends to only pop up sparingly. But, the long and short of it is, the last time we saw Kairi in WWE, she was seen getting the back of her skull caved in against a garage door, courtesy of Bayley. So 3 years later, Kairi's over it. She forgives Bayley, for giving her a concussion and putting her out of commission for 3 years. No, she's just over it now. I guess time does heal all wounds. By the way, that took me approximately, 30 seconds to recap? Between the broken English of Io and Kairi trying to cut promos, and Dakota rambling on forever about God knows what, I think it took them an hour to explain all this. The crowd is literally sitting on their hands, deader than doornails, and after they do their fake group hug, here comes Bianca to tell Damage Control that she's got some backup. And as soon as they queued up Charlotte's music, that's where I immediately checked out. In fact, I will read you everything I wrote down for the remainder of the segment. It's 3 bullet points. Fuck Charlotte Flair. Asuka does the third most incomprehensible Japanese promo within the span of the last 2 minutes. I believe she said she had a boogie. That is what I was able to gather. And fuck everything about this segment. Garbage television. The most boring segment in the history of mankind. And at that point, I needed to go wash my face off with cold water just to keep myself awake. After that previous girls segment damn near put me into a coma. So I missed the majority of this Dragon Lee Cedric Alexander match. Which is fine by me because did we not literally just see this exact match like 2 or 3 weeks ago? So why we needed to see it again, I have no clue. Aside from the fact that these people are lazy and are just sleepwalking through television production at this point. Somebody won. I don't know. I don't really care. Tell you what I did care about, though, was seeing how LA Knight was going to bounce back from that Crown Jewel loss. The moment of truth, this was. Would LA Knight be able to come out as a white-hot babyface? Would he still be as hot post-Crown Jewel as he was pre-Crown Jewel? Well, the answer? It's still LA Knight's game. Yeah. And you know what? I'll say this, if anything. This right here was definitely going to be a proving ground segment for LA Knight. To demonstrate that he could still have the people in the palm of his hands, despite having his shoulders pinned at Crown Jewel. Like, he could have walked out there with boo-boo job face and conceded defeat. I'm just another guy on the roster now. Just another name to add to the list of Roman's previous challengers. But no. Not this guy. No, he goes out there and fucking tears the house down is what he does. He says he's not going to cry over spilled milk because he did exactly what he said he was going to do at Crown Jewel. He walked in, He beat Roman within an inch of his life, and he nearly walked out with the WWE Championship had it not been for Jimmy Uso, who at this point deserves a major pay raise from Roman for keeping his ass in check. And yes, subtle thing here, but I will point it out. He did refer to the Universal title as the WWE Championship multiple times. Was it a slip of the tongue? Did he just not know what the belt was called? I don't know. Frankly, I'm all for shortening the title name at this point. Because undisputed WWE Universal Champion, it is quite the mouthful. If we can simplify it again and just call it the WWE Championship, they'd be doing us all a favor. So anyway, he's out there doing his thing. The crowd is literally just foaming at the mouth over anything the guy does. But you knew eventually they'd have to bring out the buzzkill and a concerted effort to just drag LA Knight through the mud even more. Now they got him out there desperately trying to carry Grayson Fodder to a passable talk segment. And boy howdy, did LA Knight shine here or what? Just wiping his ass with his fucking uncharismatic blank slate personality. Calling him an incel and a basement dweller. Saying he's out there looking like he's dressed for school pictures, but with the ugly $5 haircut he's got going on, he ought to be kept as far away from school grounds as humanly possible. And I'm just watching Knight bury this guy 10 feet under. I'm loving every second of it. Finally, he gives Fodder a couple clean shots. Sends him out to the floor where he ends up smashing a water bottle over his head. Just totally making the guy look like an idiot. And when the segment was over, here was my conclusion. Whatever their current plans are for Cody Rhodes to be slated as the guy to beat Roman for the title at WrestleMania next year, scrap it. No offense to Cody. I think we may have a stronger candidate. If there is a plan B in the works, we need to capitalize on it. Now. He's still massively over. He's got the people firmly behind him. They have not given up. They're bringing the signs. They're doing the catchphrase chants. They're into everything he does on television. And above all else, the one thing that stands out about LA Knight, when you watch the guy on television, he comes across as a big star. And it's not just the crowd reception. It's a big part of it. But it's more. It's the way he carries himself. The way he conducts himself. He's a grown man that works and acts like an adult. You know, he's not talking about friends or bitching and moaning about high school level drama. He's saying, I got robbed. Everybody saw it. And I'm not done with the bloodline until I get my revenge on all those motherfuckers. And until I walk out as the new Universal Champion, or whatever the hell we're calling that belt now. But you actually buy what the guy says. It was great. I mean, hands down, the best part of this show, no question. Now, the match they had was nothing remarkable. LA Knight versus Grayson Fodder. I didn't even know why they did this match. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I understand exactly why they did it. Because I'll tell you this. I can't stand the push of Grayson Fodder. But if you're going to use him, I'm definitely an advocate of putting him on there as an enhancement guy. Especially to give LA Knight a win back. Because that's what this was. You know, after the loss to Roman, he kind of needed a bounce back win to keep him in the main event pecking order, so I was fine with it. I also got a kick out of Kevin Owens fucking around with the telestrator. making fun of Grayson Fodder's goofy, punchable face. Kevin is actually really entertaining when he's doing comedy. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but I actually kind of dig Owens in this role. It has those no fucks given vibes. Those are usually the best moments in comedy and wrestling, where the talent just totally phones it in and stops giving a shit. I mean, I definitely think that's where we are with Kevin Owens at this point. He's making a boat ton of money. He doesn't give a fuck. And why would he, you know? They got him out there in a sleeveless tee and a necktie. He already looks like a dork. May as well act like one. This also didn't bode well for him a few segments later when Theory and Fodder went to confront him, and they dumped another bottle of water on him. I guess the rule of thumb is, whenever you're a special guest commentator for the night, you cannot lay your hands on the talent. Otherwise, you're risking suspension. Well, to the shock of no one, Kevin Owens couldn't handle having water dumped on him. So he actually told Michael Cole outright, "I've got to go get suspended." Oh, that's a new one. I don't think I've heard that quote before. Guess we'll see if Nick Aldis actually lives up to his managerial duties. If Owens is on the show next week running roughshod, then I guess Aldis is just another version of Adam Pearce with a UK accent. So that left us with about 15 minutes left of airtime. And, since I already basically tapped out on the show following the LA Knight segment, I said, a 6-girls tag team main event to end the show, huh? That is what this alleged creative team came up with Charlotte as a featured babyface. No thanks. I think I'd rather go back and watch that girls segment from hour 1 again. Now, for those curious, the match is Bayley, Io, and Kyrie versus Asuka, Charlotte, and Bianca. And for the kind of people that like women's wrestling, I'm sure you had a wonderful time watching this. But it was getting late. I had other things to do. The last thing I wanted to see in the world of wrestling on Saturday evening was a 6-girls tag match. So what happened? This is where having a co-host would be beneficial. I did see the little huddle session with Asuka and Damage Control, so did she turn heel? Is that what I'm gathering out of all this? Cool. I don't care. I also saw Botch Z run out, so I'm pretty sure that went over like a fart in church. Probably did a bunch of sloppy punches and catfight spots. Because watching her wrestle is like watching a double amputee wrestle a blind dude. The visual isn't pleasant, but it is something to behold. What is it with Triple H's fascination with this fucking chick? I remember they push her like crazy in NXT too. What's the appeal with her? Like, are there actually dudes out there that are into that kind of stuff? The hair and the tattoos and the piercings and the weird personality. Like, what the fuck is that? Not my flavor, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, that was how they rounded out the show. I mean, remove the LA Knight thing from the equation. The show blew a cock. They may as well just re-air a 2-hour highlight package of the Saudi show again. If this was going to be the effort they put into running SmackDown the following Friday. God. It's just lousy. Like, who would want to watch 2 hours of this stuff? I don't even know why I bothered. Like, LA Knight's promo was the only thing even worth talking about. I could have just found a YouTube clip of that somewhere. What else happened? The LWO stuff and the Escobar turn? If we can even call it that, who even knows? Telling you, man, it's like clockwork. As soon as the bloodline takes a back seat, it becomes a totally different show. It's just a lifeless, nothing happening 2-hour snooze fest. Like even the momentary glimpse of LA Knight getting to Shawn on the microphone. For what? All 3 minutes? Like he was the only star on the entire show. The only big name the audience gave a crap about. You know, we're coming up on Survivor Series pretty fast. I mean, if this was supposed to entice me to want to watch that show in 2 or 3 weeks, they need to try a little harder. All this did was make me want to reach for my pillow. We need a new name. The Friday Night Vacuum Show. Where it just sucks the life out of you and makes you want to fall asleep. Maybe that's the goal. And if it is, then man, did they achieve it. And we'll see how the ratings do. Rumor is Roman isn't even currently booked for Survivor Series in 3 weeks. I have no idea what the hell the selling point's supposed to be if they don't have Roman booked on the card. I mean, didn't they say the gimmick or the theme is War Games? Well, that's what they did last year, so it would make sense, right? But if I recall correctly, wasn't Roman booked in War Games last year? They did a big Bloodline featured match, right? Of course, the personnel was a little different at the time, but how do you do a War Games match without Roman? Like, you're going to rely on Jimmy Uso and Solo Sikoa to carry the bulk of the action for the heels? Wow. And unless the Judgment Day is going to be factored into it, which, I mean, you could do that. I still think the bigger draw would be some collection of top babyfaces versus Roman in the Bloodline, but hey, if they think they have a better plan, more power to them. I'd love to see him prove me wrong. But with that, let's move on to Retro NXT from whatever the date was for this show. November 13th, 2013. Pretty compact episode this week. Only about 36 minutes in runtime. Probably coming up on the tail end of the recent taping schedule. And we'll talk about the big featured match later on. But, overall, we've been doing these NXT deep dives for the last month or so. I'm having fun with it. And, I precisely started here in 2013 with the review series because talked about it before. This was right around the point where I started hearing about the rumblings of the whole NXT model. That people were starting to turn their heads toward the product more frequently. Mainly the smarter fans. With where we are right now, I'd say NXT is kind of in a coasting mode. They're not really breaking down any barriers, not really moving the needle one way or the other. They're in sort of a weird stagnation period where they're definitely trying to build up some new star power. They're gaining traction with their core NXT market with each passing week. But, it is still far from what many would consider the boom period. At the same time, they're taking the logical steps to try to get new talent over. And that, I think, is what a lot of people watching WWE at the time weren't really seeing on the main roster, which is why everybody sort of gravitated towards this product. I mean, we literally just sat here the other week and laughed at the idea that their featured world title match going into Survivor Series that year was Randy Orton versus the fucking Big Show. Like, come on. Ain't nobody want to see that. Not in 2013. You had all the junk going on with Hunter and Stephanie being plastered all over that show every week as the authority figures. Like, Bryan Danielson was getting jacked around. Like, overall, it was just a really bad time to be a main roster WWE fan. And the hardcores were lacking in a niche product they could really sink their teeth into. AEW wasn't even a blimp on the radar at that point. The indies were still kind of an underground thing that didn't really take off to the degree it would several years later. And of course, you had companies like ROH and TNA around, but I mean, yeah, in name only, if we're being blunt about it. So you can kind of see why a lot of people wanted this NXT thing to take off. And right now we're still in the growing pain stages where Hunter's been put in charge to oversee most of the booking. But it's still got that Vince McMahon handprint on so many aspects of the show's presentation. And that's always going to be a drawback. The matches are still pretty crummy too, by and large. Or maybe that was just an overall reflection on Bayley and Charlotte versus Summer Rae and Sasha Banks. You know, funny, isn't it? You had a SmackDown main event on Friday where Bayley and Charlotte were also in tag team action. They were just on opposing teams. Meanwhile, here they are in 2013 working together on the same team. No, at least they were up until the final 3 minutes. But some things never change, do they? 10 years ago, you had Bayley and Charlotte at the forefront of the women's division. 10 years later, same old song and dance. Kind of goes to show just how little female star power has actually been properly developed in WWE in the last decade. Take out Rhea Ripley from the equation, I guess. Maybe Becky Lynch. Although you don't hear much about her these days, do you? So anyway, the match here is kind of chugging along for a while. I'm like half-heartedly paying attention to it. Because after last week's segment where the girls were all bitching and griping at each other in the locker room, I didn't want to see any of them on television the following week. And then right at the very end, as Bayley's trying to tag in Charlotte, completely at random, with no explanation, Charlotte just cold cocks Bayley in the face and lays her out. She hits natural selection and then leaves her in prone position for Sasha to climb on top and get the pinfall. At which point, Charlotte then raises Summer Rae and Sasha's arms and I guess officially declares herself a member of the BFFs. Beautiful, fierce females. Yay, girl power. So yeah, that made no sense. Although I shouldn't totally poon it, because how often have I come here on the channel and say I much prefer watching Charlotte as a heel? At least it's somewhat authentic, as opposed to watching her pretend to be a babyface when she's the most insufferable, unlikable personality in the history of women's wrestling. I mean, I have absolutely no memory of this ever happening. Partially because I have no memory of anything involving the BFFs. But I guess we'll see how Bayley responds. Does she have any friends that can help her out? In her quest to take down the new 3-person unit of Sasha, Summer, and Charlotte. The plot thickens. So then we come back for Camacho versus Aiden English. I believe Camacho is the now recognizable Tonga Loa of New Japan fame. One of those examples in wrestling where the job guy actually looks more visually impressive than the guy they're trying to put over. In this case, it's Camacho overpowering and throwing around English for like 90 seconds until he gets cut off and put away with the director's cut. If I didn't know any better, I'd have thought Camacho was the guy they were trying to spotlight here. He had personality, great body, good basics, moved and worked like a heel should. Meanwhile, English is out there looking like one of the poster victims for the Hunger Project. But of course, he's the guy they put over. I mean, the gimmick is still death television. I don't care what anybody says. But at least they spared us the encore presentation this time. Now, we did get 90 seconds of Rusev and Lana speaking in Bulgarian, which was quite riveting. At least they put Lana on there to show some skin. Of course, Rusev's standing there looking like $1 million. You want to talk about golden missed opportunities in WWE's history books? Well, you can throw Rusev at the top of the list. Y'all can thank John Cena for that burial treatment. So then we had Danny Burch getting mowed down by Mason Ryan in a few minutes. Good old Mason Ryan. Yeah, there's a name long since forgotten in the archives of wrestling. If Wardlow and Dave Bautista had a love child from the UK, that's Mason Ryan in a nutshell. Man, looking back at some of these old NXT names, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they would have trained in OVW like 10 years prior. Just a little too late to the party, I guess. Because, man, I look at a guy like Mason Ryan. I mean, he had a lot of tools. He was greener than a pepper tree in the ring, but he had size, great body, pretty good-looking dude with natural body language. Maybe a little too respective to a Batista-type powerhouse. So, I mean, if he was coming up in that same class, you'd kind of run into the problem of having two similar-looking guys that work the same style. But it just sucks how a lot of these names just came and went throughout the 2010s. Like, I don't remember much about Mason Ryan in WWE aside from he was big. So Vince pushed him for a little while. I don't even know if he's still active in the business today. That's the sad part. So many of these guys, they just fell under the radar. I just think, too, you know, with proper training and working alongside the right people, Mason Ryan's the kind of guy that could have gone somewhere in the business. You know, had he come up through the ranks earlier and maybe you've gotten the chance to work with a Jim Cornette, I'd have loved to see what Corny would have done with him. Makes you wonder sometimes. Oh, by the way, he went over with a full Nelson Slam. Didn't really have much else to write down about it. Mason Ryan big, Mason Ryan win with move. That was the extent of my meticulous note-taking. And with that, also briefly noting that Bo Dallas will be back next week, we arrive at the main event. It is the rubber match of sorts in the trilogy of Adrian Neville versus Corey Graves in the most hastily thrown together tag team split/feud of all time. Where about 4 weeks ago, Graves and Neville were seamlessly functioning tag partners competing for the NXT tag belts. Fast forward about 3 weeks later, now we've reached the point where they're having their third match in the series. The blow-off of sorts. 3 to 4 weeks. That is how quickly we've gotten to this point. Now, it's also important to note, this was 2 out of 3 falls. Why? I'm not really sure. Guess they figured, well, they've traded 1 fall apiece in the series, so fuck it, let's do best 2 out of 3. And they had plenty of airtime by the time they sounded the opening bell for this thing, so that was at least good, seeing they were willing to give it some time. And this was a good match. Really good match, in fact. Best one in the series by far. I'll tell you, man, Adrian Neville in particular, he was fantastic here. Everything he did, from the babyface flurry early on to the way he sold the knee when he got cut off for the heat. I'll talk about the big spot that happened in the third fall that left me floored. At the same time, though, man, it's so aggravating. I think I talked about this a little bit. I remember when Pac, Neville, whatever you want to call him, I remember when he wrestled for NXT. Like, he's about to enter a pretty big stage of his career in the coming months when he gets showcased as the top champion. And the Adrian Neville I watched in NXT 10 years ago is nothing like the version of him I saw in AEW. Not even close. Where he's just out there doing all the bad indie shit like the rest of those untrained, unprofessional douchebags. It sucks. Here he is a decade prior having one of the best singles performances I've ever seen him have. Just a total regression in his career since then. Talk about how frustrating it is, because God forbid if AEW actually pushed that guy like a top heel, he could have been something. No, he's just a generic middle-of-the-road guy who pops in every now and then to work with the lucha fucks. And that's about it. But it goes to show, when you work for a professional company that has trainers and agents that actually monitor the shit you do in the ring. But I love the way they pieced together this match. You get Neville running wild from the onset. Graves is completely incapable of getting any offense going. And then within the first minute and a half of the match, you get Neville catching Graves with a kick to the head. He goes down in perfect position for Neville to hit the red arrow. Boom. Minute into the first fall, Neville's up 1-0. Hot start. Got the people on their feet and motivated from the very beginning. And of course, you figured they would take that opportunity to slow things down and let Graves work Neville over for a while. So they go to the previously injured ankle deal. Neville had been selling that in previous matches. Graves obviously has it scouted because he knew about the injury going in. So you get Graves methodically working that over. And Neville's selling was really good here. He's limping around. Like, you can see the pain and the anguish on his face as he's trying to gain his distance from Graves. They had a great setup for the second fall. Graves has Neville hooked in a single leg Boston Crab. And Neville's fighting to try to reverse it. And after he turns over and kicks Graves away, Neville's immediately chop blocked from behind. Graves locks in the Lucky 13 submission and forces a tap out. So that ties everything at one apiece. And good transition into the third fall, so we can sort of wait for Neville's comeback sequence. But the final 5 minutes of this thing, it was something else, dude. This spot at the end with Neville, when he tries to go up top for a red arrow, but he basically collapses on the turnbuckle because he can't put weight on his bad knee. Dude, I don't know how you work something like that, but when Neville came down and slipped on the turnbuckle, damn near crippling himself when he crashed on the mat, I thought the guy was dead. I thought there's no way you can practice something like that. That was sheer luck that Neville didn't break his neck trying to execute something like that. But it was such an awesome spot. And of course, at that point, the fans think Graves has the match in the bag because he immediately locks in Lucky 13 again. But this time, Neville fights, and he grabs the bottom rope to break the hold. Fast forward a couple seconds later, Graves tries to pull Neville back to cinch in the hold again. And this time it's Neville capitalizing with a small package 3 count. So he wins the match and the series 2-1. Awesome finish. Got a great pop. Graves was good selling the frustration afterwards. I love that Neville didn't waste any time celebrating in the ring. Like, as soon as he got the pin, he was out of there, powdered. And it was the perfect layout for a 2 out of 3 falls match. I mean, I'm sure Dusty had a hand in putting that together, because I saw a lot of Dustyisms in the way Neville was working that underdog babyface role here. It was good. I think this really put Neville on the map for a lot of NXT fans. The sort of relentless, never say die attitude. You know, in a way, it's kind of similar to the way they were working Sami Zayn's gimmick. But, I mean, Sami's a much different animal because the personalities are so polar opposite. Like, Neville's a super serious, high-energy athlete. Sami's the happy-go-lucky, relatable common man that everybody can identify with. But, hey, just like that, you've already established your top 2 babyface names. And with great heels like Bo Dallas to counterbalance those personalities, makes for a great set of feuds. Like I'm saying, they had good stuff going on at the time. A lot of the middle-of-the-road stuff on the shows were just kind of there, but hey, the NXT title picture was where it was at. They had some names. They were definitely doing the right thing. I mean, when you look back, the last 20 minutes of the show was pretty much the only thing worth watching. I don't know about the previous 15 minutes. I mean, the girls' match was nothing to write home about, unless you're a fan of Russo-like heel swerves that make no sense and aren't properly built up to. Elsewise, you're basically looking at 2 filler squashes that were just kind of there to kill time. But this was all about Neville and Graves' blow-off. I'm assuming it was the blow-off. I don't really know if there's anywhere else for this feud to go now. I mean, you already talked about Bo coming back, so it'll be interesting to see how they shake up the title scene. Because he's still got Sami lurking in the backdrop too, and I think he's still under a temporary suspension in storyline. Remember the whole deal where he was mocking JBL and running down management? I don't really remember the full details of what happened there, but I mean, he's been off the show methodically. But it was a strong main event. Definitely a showcase performance for Neville. Corey Graves was good too. Yeah, I've talked about it before. I'm not a very big Corey Graves fan. But I won't demote his involvement here because he was a great dance partner for Neville. I think the only complaint I ever had about this feud was just how rushed everything came together during the tapings. This is one of those programs that could have easily extended out for another 3 or 4 months if they really wanted to stretch it out. You know, let the guys cut promos on each other, shoot some more angles, do something to really heat up the intensity of the program. But what's done is done. I assume Neville moves on to the title hunt from here. Graves, I honestly don't remember where he goes from here. I mean, I know pretty soon he's going to be dealing with some health complications. Like, he's about to go through a rough patch where he's going to be in and out of action due to concussion problems, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs. Like, he eventually has to retire from in-ring competition because the doctors wouldn't clear him to wrestle. It's kind of how he became the designated color guy for what we see on the main roster programs now. It was one of those guaranteed job for life deals because I think the company had sympathy for his situation. But yeah, he's not an active wrestler for much longer. By like spring or summer of next year, I think the guy's pretty much done. So we'll see how that all unfolds. They'll probably run a little longer with the heel gimmick until he's out, but it's kind of all there was to say about that one. A one-match program, but it was a damn good one. Very good match. I don't know how good the show was overall, but I'll leave you all to judge that in the comments section. I appreciate you guys coming back to support the channel. Again, we're here on Monday and Friday each week. I have way too many tabs open right now. So as we put this show to pasture, we'll be back on Friday for the Classic Review series. And I think on Friday I'm going to kind of update everybody on the current podcast schedule for the next couple weeks, because I got to get my ducks in a row as we're piecing together all these big pay-per-view events. And, well, I'll get back to you on details on that. So thanks for watching, everybody. Take care of yourselves and have a good week. Peace out.